Hi, in this lesson, we're going to look at for loops. There are two types of loops in programming: while loops, which loop for an indefinite amount of time, and for loops, which loop for a defined amount of time. In this lesson, we're going to focus on for loops. A for loop is a control structure that repeats instructions a fixed number of times. For loops are a very important tool in programming, and you will likely use them often. Here's the basic structure of a for loop. For loops are similar to other program control statements that you have seen in that they start with a header and they contain a body of code to execute inside of curly braces. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the for loop header. For loops start with the for keyword. There are then three terms inside of the parentheses. Each loop uses what's called a loop variable. The first thing that needs to be done in the loop is to initialize the new variable. Traditionally, loops use the variable I, but it can really be any valid variable. In this example, you can see that I is initialized with a value of 0. The next part of the loop header is a conditional statement. The conditional statement tells the loop how long to execute. Similar to the while loop, the for loop will loop while the condition is true. In this case, the loop will continue to loop while the loop variable I is less than 1000. The final part of the loop header tells the program how to change I each time through the loop. In this case, the program uses the incrementer to increase I by 1 each time. Put all together, this code will execute 1000 times. The first time through the loop variable I will be equal to 0, and the last time through it'll be equal to 999. Notice in the loop header how there are semicolons after both the first and second terms, but not the third term. Let's look at an example. Here we initialize I with a value of 0. You check the condition, and since I is less than 0, we enter the loop. Once in the loop, I is equal to 0 and the program prints 0. At the end of the loop, I increments up to 1. I is now equal to 1, so it's still less than 3. The program prints 1 and then increments up to 2. 2 is still less than 3, so we go back into the loop and the program prints the number 2. The program now increments up to 3. Now 3 is not less than 3, so the loop is complete. Notice in this loop, the variable was initialized at 0 and the condition was less than 3. The result was looping 3 times with I at 0, 1, and 2. This is a very common setup for a traditional loop where you want to specify the number of times the program can execute. The loop structure is actually incredibly flexible, so let's take a look at some other loop headers that you can use. You can start and stop your loop at any point. It doesn't have to start at 0. Also notice that the conditional statement can use other operators such as less than or equal to. You can also start your loop variable higher and count down using the decrement shortcut. You can have your loop variable increment up by more than 1. In this case, the plus equal sign tells the program to add 2 to the loop variable. Whoa, hold on a second. Let's pause here. Plus equals? Well, on the last slide, we used a valuable shortcut that you may not have seen before. Using the operators such as plus equals, minus equals, etc., you can simplify your equation. Notice that the equivalent of x plus equals 2 is the same as saying x equals x plus 2. Each of our main operators have an equivalent shortcut that you may see used from time to time. Okay, so let's go back to our loop structures. The last one to demonstrate is using multiples. In this loop, the loop variable I will double each time through the loop. So I will equal 1, then 2, 4, 8, 16, etc. And with that, let's take a look at this in the code editor. Okay, so let's take a look at a basic loop example here. If we run this, we're going to see that we print 10 times, 0 being the first, 9 being the last, and then we exit the loop and we print out our loop finished. And now we don't have to necessarily start. If we want to actually have the numbers 1 to 10, we can start at 1 and we can say less than or equal to 10, and now we're going to print 10 times again, but we're going to print 1 through 10. And we can also change this up. We can do different increments. So we can say I times equals 2. And this is just a shortcut to say I equals I times I plus 2. And so we run that. I equals I times 2. We can see we go 1, 2, 4, 8, and then we're finished. Once we get to 8, it multiplies, gets to 16, is no longer less than 10. Okay. We can also do things like counting down. So we can do 10, and we can say, well, while I is greater than 0, and we'll do I minus minus. And we have to be careful. If we switch this around and we forget to switch that around, we're going to get an infinite loop, which will never actually end. So that's our basic loops. Go ahead and play around on your own.